Right.
9 minutes to 9. In November 2012, Ben Brooks-Dutton was walking along the pavement with his wife and baby son when a car ran through some traffic lights and sped towards them.
Ben managed to push his son Jackson's pram out of its path, but it struck and killed his wife, Desreen.
2 months after the accident, Ben began a blog where he wrote about how he was dealing with his grief. The response was huge. Ben appeared on the programme last year. Now he's written a book about his experiences. He's with us again.
Morning.
Very good morning to you. Lovely to see you back again. Thank you very much. For people who are not familiar with the story, and I know so many people are, they've so much engaged with this online and all the rest of it, just to tell us a little bit about what happened.
About the accident itself, yeah.
I know you can't say too much.
No, we were just walking. We'd spent the day with friends and we were walking home to their house towards a train station in West Hampstead, and a car just came towards us. We were so narrowly missed, and you know, I never thought that when I was actually really scared that my son was going to die. It's like time really did slow down, and I saw his death at the end of this and not my wife's. So, you know, managed to save him, but, you know, the worst possible thing could happen.
You wrote after the accident, you started writing a very powerful blog, and you came to speak to us about it last year. I'm just wondering how much has changed for you since you were last on the programme.
Things have changed. I think the thing is with grief, though, I think people expect you to somehow move on after about a year. There's this view that that's what happens, but it's a very chaotic experience. One day you feel like you're doing okay, and the next minute, actually, it doesn't really work in days even. Everything just changes all again, and there's a trigger, and you're back to the beginning again. So I really wanted to fight this misconception with the book that time does change everything, because it doesn't really.
At the beginning, it's interesting reading, you kind of were sort of over-coping at the beginning, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I was in massive shock. You know, it was the coping mechanism. It's what got me through. So I think, you know, I really pushed against this idea of being strong. But I think I was at the beginning. I think the shock made me very strong. And, you know, I wrote and wrote and wrote in order to cope with it, to get my thoughts across and to formulate them in my own head. And that started with the blog and then turned into the book.
Jackson, getting older, of course, now developing very quickly, becoming more aware of the world around him and aware of things like death now.
Yeah, increasingly so, yeah. At the beginning, he didn't know what death was. I took advice from charities like Grief Encounter and Child Bereavement UK and Winston's Wish, and they said that he wouldn't understand the concept of death till he was around 4 or 5. So I told him that his mummy had gone away and couldn't come back, and she didn't want to, but I've only just really, you know, been able to start talking to him about death and for him to start to know what that means.
I love the title of the book. It's not raining, Daddy, it's happy, which is kind of, that comes direct, it's a direct quote from him, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. I think, you know, I wrote the book about grief, and it's about, you know, how grief affects all sorts of different people, not just widowers. But for me, it was about trying to see the world through the eyes of a child increasingly as well, and to come down on his level. And it really was raining in so many different ways for me. But when, you know, this was a direct quote from him, because in those moments of darkness, there is happiness as well when you've got a little charming boy like him.
Yeah. He did say something else off the back of that as well, which you didn't put in the title.
Yeah, he said, it's not raining, Daddy, it's happy, and then he said straight away, silly Daddy. But, you know, that didn't make it
well, maybe you can write that keep that for the next book.
Possibly.
You had a massive response, of course,
to
the blog. I mean, just from how far afield have people written to you?
Oh, everywhere around the world. I can see where people are viewing the blog from around the world as well, and it's had 1.5 million hits now in just over a year. So, and it just grows all the time. So it just shows that it's not just widowers that are reading this. It's all sorts of different people that have been affected by grief, and people that want to know how to help their friends and loved ones through it as well.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, because just at the end of the book, you've got a whole a sort of list of what to do and what not to do, because it's a very difficult time for friends as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that list comes from another organisation called Care for the Family, so it's not my first-hand advice, it's theirs, and it really helped me because people kept asking me what they could, you know, they'd say to me, let me know what I can do to help, and at the time I thought, so it's more pressure on me, then I've got to come up with all of the ideas, and I thought, I have to, you know, I need to make these people feel better, to make me feel better. So what am I going to ask them to do? So this list really, it changed my life really. It really changed things in those early days, and I sent it to all my closest friends and family. Things did change then. I just emailed them and I said, listen, I think that honesty is going to get me through this. So I need you to know, and I want you to stop asking me what to do, and I want you to do some of these things.
What are the most important things on the list?
Well, for me, it was practical things. Like, I remember someone saying to me, I just wish there was something I could do to help. And I said, you can go and clean the bathroom. Because I wanted to go and spend time with my son and make sure that he was okay, but there was still a house to run.
Yes.
So, you know, and things like dropping food around, coming and playing with my son as well, not just coming to talk to me about my loss, but actually to come and play trains with him, because even that was exhausting at the time.
Yes, and very emotionally exhausting for you as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously people ask the whole time as well, you know, we all ask that silly question, how are you doing, which is not actually what you possibly want to be asked either.
Well, I'm getting more used to it now. I have got more used to the questions and how
so
to deal with them.
I suppose it's repetitive. Is it repetitive behaviour?
Well, I think that, you know, I'm really honest about it. So I say, right now I'm okay.
Right.
But, you know, who can answer the question about how they are? I think we're programmed to just say we're fine generally, and that's not very helpful, because sometimes, you know, you've got flu and someone will ask you how you are. You say, oh, I'm fine, and you think, oh, I've got the flu.
Yeah.
And so you realise that you just come out with all these banal statements, and that's what I've been fighting against.
And there's a challenge for you with Jackson, and not just that you're raising him on your own, but also of him having any memory at all of his mother, because how old was he when Green died?
He just turned 2, but I know for a fact that he's got memories because I test him in the nicest possible way. I asked him about our old flat the other day, which was 3 stories up, and he started to talk about how me and Mummy and Daddy used to live in a tree house. So I thought he does remember the stairs, and he remembers being there, and that was over a year ago.
And how do you keep the memory of her alive?
We talk about her every day. There's pictures of her up on the wall. We bring her into stories. We write to her on Mother's Day. We draw pictures for her, and we just talk about her all the time. She's very, very present in our lives still, and that's what this book is about on a very personal level for me. It's about capturing those memories and retaining them, so he's got something to refer to when he's older.
And do you think it's particularly has been particularly difficult? And this is why you did it, because it was it's a widower's story. Do you think, as a man having lost someone, we treat a man would treat you differently than perhaps if you'd been a woman losing someone?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's an assumption that you're not going to cope on certain levels, you know, on a domestic level and things like that. But in some respects, I think that because women bring up children more often alone, I think that there's often more of a spotlight on men and male bereavement. Like, we are offered more support because we're expected not to be able to cope. So sometimes I feel that it's actually very difficult for women as well, and that's, you know, I think this book will help them understand that too.
If there's one thing then that you would say to somebody who should, God forbid, find themselves in the situation you were a couple of years ago, what would you like to say to them?
I'd say just be honest with yourself and be honest with other people about how you feel, because the people that matter and the people that are going to continue to support you will support you, however honest you are about their feelings, and you know, you don't have to lie to yourself to get through this.
Ben, thanks very much.
It's a really beautiful book. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ben's book, It's Not Raining, Daddy, It's Happy, is out tomorrow.
It's just about coming up to 9 o'clock.